Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Mr. Dogboat333, and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4, the New Order Last Days of Europe as the State of Guangdong. In the last video, we only got a few days in, but we checked out the State of Guangdong, got an introduction to a few of the characters. We still have some time that we need to get more introduced to how the country works and all that. Just fucking walking my absolute. Yeah. So I know, he did some reworking on, I think, all the Indian provinces. There's a fuckload of states in India now. I think they reworked some of the borders here, I want to say. These got, Sri Lanka. Ceylon, sorry. They have stuff. We also have Ho Chi Minh. So, looks like Vietnam or China might have their own Vietnam issue. So many new states for nothing to happen, and I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. But yeah. One of the three pearls. I want to read all of these eventually, but I don't think I should do it today just because there's a lot of stuff that I want to at least get the ball rolling a little bit, and I already have stuff I need to read anyway. So let's get a look at what ideology we're running with right now. So first off, we're led right now by the Kanton Minsaifu. Legislative councils, in theory, and a political advisory body appointed by the chief executive to advise and legitimize their actions as part of a unified political corpus, the Guangdong Civil Administration. In practice, of course, the capture of the Legislative Council by corporate interests made political actions in fact alive. Those remain loyal to the appointed chief executive Suzuki's vision to the prerogative of a state above that of money interests are seen as the executors of the civil administration of the Legislative Council. I've seen some of the content of what pre-release India's content. Yeah. All the tea and all that wacky shit. Yeah. So, we're corporate statism, which is fascist. Money can buy many things: towers of steel, cities of gold, the loyalty of craven men, but not a monopoly on violence or a country. At least not yet. Although the role of corporate capital in this polity is monumental, entirely out of the scope of what would be expected anywhere else in the world, the state maintains its prerogatives. Though the corporations and their lieutenants are omnipresent, and their wishes cannot be ignored, their desire and machinations are ultimately subject to the whims and needs of a single primarch. Even if the economic and social lives of this society is dominated by private enterprise, the political direction of the state remains firmly on the grip of a singular entity, bending the efforts of others to serve a purpose greater than mere profit. Here, the labor and capital are both subsumed under the vision of their betters. Interesting stuff. Check the Legislative Council real quick. So we have Sony, we have Matsushita, we have Fujitsu, we have Yasuda, and we have Suzuki. So let's take a look at Sony first. Initially incorporated as Sonosly Electronics Company in 1954, Sony's Morita Akio's second commercial venture following the acquisition of Tokyo Telecommunications in 1952. Sony's ability to drive audiovisual innovation at affordable prices, mixed with a Zujin Japanese workforce, has made it the official representative of Guangdong's Zujin population. Having rebuilt its business in the shadow of the Japanese, Morita consciously advocates for Zujin interests in Guangdong, culminating in the creation of his own faction in the Legislative Council in 1960. Sony's now too influential to be ignored, a reputation that Morita bears proudly against his Japanese rivals, with no rivalry as bitter as his vendetta against his former partner, Masaru of Fujitsu. Then you have Matsuhara, found in 1918. Matsushita Electric is one of Japan's most prestigious electronics manufacturers, starting from selling electrical sockets to developing a vast section of leisure and home appliances. Ever hungry for new opportunities, Matsushita was one of the first to enter Guangdong as a vanguard of Japanese capitalism on the Chinese mainland. Among the major companies leading the Legislative Council, Matsushita is a firm member of a Japanese corporate establishment. Neither is soft hard as Sony, nor is bullhead as Fujitsu. Its representatives in Guangdong, Mashiharu, is both reliable and adaptable to Guangdong's ever-changing condition, with both eyes firmly on the bottom line. Then we have Masaru. Established in 1935 as a joint venture between Siemens and second-tier Furusawa Zaibatsu, Fujitsu has established itself as a pioneer in the field of telecommunications and computing. After Masaru joined Fujitsu in 1952, the firm has aggressively expanded its operations in Guangdong, dedicating to commercializing bleeding-edge computing technology with its Japanese-led core engineering staff. For Buka, however, machinery is but a means. The end lies in the total intellectual uprising of man and woman. More so than any other company on the Legislative Council, Fujitsu advocates a vision of a future driven by science and engineering, a meritocracy of limitless ambition, where anyone in this world anyone who has what it takes can and will excel. In Buka's world, the only way is up. Interesting for sure. The Yasuda financial conglomerate is one of the big four Zaibatsu in Japan, and the one most aggressive in expanding overseas, including in Guangdong. From major corporate loans to payday lending, Yasuda Holdings is deeply intertwined with the economy of entire CPS, expanding at breakneck pace overseas to make up for constrained opportunities on the home islands. Yasuda's prominence as one of the only major Zaibatsus among the four companies in Guangdong gives its outsized influence in the Legislative Council. Deep pockets can buy many favors, and Matsuzawa's Suzuki is well aware of the power it entails, serving as first among equals among Guangdong's corporate titans. And finally, we have Suzuki. Four companies control the lion's share of the seats in the Legislative Council. A sizable block remains loyal to the Chief of Administration of Guangdong and the Chief Executive. These individuals, a collection of Japanese expatriates and politically reliable notables, flock to the Chief Executives both for his proximity to power and the sizable gifts given to maintain their favor. The base motivations of these men make them reliable enforcers of Chief Executive Suzuki's will in the Legislative Council, so long as he keeps them satiated with the fruits of power and influence. With a strong mandate from Tokyo and a partnership with Yasuda in hand, I already read that. Suzuki is confident he can keep their couriers in line. I remember that lady. That she was supposed to take over India. It was fucking nuts. And like the British guy who runs the acronym that ends up being beef. That was nuts too. Corporate dorm somewhere in Guangdong, a shift of Chinese workers enjoyed a merciful day of off work. Miraculous development, the machines over which the workers were forced to slave for hours each day had broken down and were out of commission for the day. The workers split into two teams and kicked a makeshift ball around the courtyard. Many Westerners might recognize what they were playing as a version of football, but it was known to them by the Japanese name of Shukyu. After the game ended, one team drubbed the other 5-1. They broke up into the various cliques and sat down on the various aluminum stairs that led into the courtyard. While there, their discussions went along the usual lines. The families they left behind, or in some hapless cases, had been forcibly separated from. Many wanted to head out to see a movie, but none of them had the passes they might need to leave the dormitories, and it was not technically a scheduled day off. Even if they did, the guards wouldn't let them leave, not until they demonstrated proof of renting a place elsewhere. Where the hell would that happen? The workers contemplated their situation. Life in Guangdong was unquestionably a vale of tears, filled with mourning and weeping, though. Of course, the workers would be far coarser about it if one asked them. But it could be worse, they knew well. They could be in China, where their compatriots were all poor, miserable, utterly bereft of hope. At least here in Guangdong, the workers could dare to dream about what might be beyond the gates. Unlike in China, where the atmosphere was misery, misery, and misery for miles around. They held on to that shred of hope. It was all off their head. What's that supposed to be meant to be Churchill? Not Churchill, that's, Red Flood. It was supposed to be, I think, Lord Mountbatten, who was supposed to rule that. worse could be fucking Manchukuo. Oh, yeah. Manchukuo is not a good state. Smog-ridden atmosphere of an industrialized district of Hong Kong, once known as Hong Kong to the British colonizers that preceded the current colonial regime, Guangdong police officers stopped someone that was suspected of shoplifting. Or so he said. Everyone and their mother-in-law knew that shoplifting cases didn't occur remotely as often as the diligent police officers claimed they were. No, even a child could tell you that this was just an unsubtle attempt to shake someone down for a bribe. The young Chinese boy that the officer had chosen to pick on protested violently, but the officer, himself a Zujin, threatened him in Cantonese to call on his Japanese superior. The boy would have resisted had he not seen a Kenpai Tai car speeding around the corner. The boy cursed violently and paid the bribe, which amounted to his wages for the day. At that, the officer, satisfied, let him go. The boy continued sweating under his breath. The reality of another night without food sunk in. The officer, on the other hand, began to rationalize his actions, as he always did when he did something like this. He wasn't paid enough, he said. That's why he did it. He had to provide for his family, even that meant that the others had to foot the bill. Law of a jungle, or whatever it was that scientist Carl Sidney said. The strong take from the weak. But his conscience kept tormenting him. Yeah, Schizo Churchill was Red Flood. Ooh, here's a question for you, because I'm curious. What do you think of Churchill? Gav. So no, I'm curious about that. Because I've asked you before about, how am I forgetting his name now? Gladstone. I asked you about Gladstone before, but Gladstone and Churchill I'm curious about. What do you think of them? It was a cloudy day in Macau, but Lam Ho Fai was feeling happy. A Zujin officer clerk in the record-keeping room of Macau was up for a promotion after spending the requisite amount of time in civil service. He thought about what you could get with the money that came with it. Better quality food from better hawkers, maybe, instead of the 20 and 30 yen snacks one got from rank-and-file ones. Perhaps a visit or two to a cheap restaurant. Electronics, perhaps. For that Sony lotter coming up with cheap radios again, maybe I could buy one of those to keep me amused at work. I'm sure my girlfriend would love something from Matsushita or even Fujitsu. But then Lam thought about it and realized what his real focus should be on. No, that's all irrelevant. It can wait. What I need is a better place to live, for me and my girlfriend. But as the clouds turned dark and rain began pouring down, his boss called him and introduced him to a new graduate from Home Islands, his new superior, the one promoted instead of him to the position of a colonial administrator. It took all of Lam's strength not to be passive-aggressive or start hurling insults. Lam's hopes had been crushed. Dejected, he went out for lunch, feeling the world go gray. It was a grim day in Macau, and Lam Ho Fai felt grim. Have some low stability. War Sport is okay-ish, I guess. A faint ray of sunlight broke through the gray smog, wafting over the factories of the Pearl River, casting a shaft of natural life into Suzuki Taichi's office. The chief executive, welcoming the distraction, followed the beam to the office floor or the ceiling window, surveying the city of Koshu, formerly Guangzhou, as he lit his third cigarette that morning. The teeming Chinese masses rushed through cityscape canyons while ignoring the signals of Guangdong police, their clamor kept distant by Kenpai Tai checkpoints. A Kenpai Tai sergeant bowed as a gleaming black Toyota Crown exited the government complex, ferrying one of the Koshu's Japanese notables back into the Japanese settlement. Beneath his feet, Suzuki felt a faint rumble through the floor, the energy of the army of the Cantonese Japanese civil servants toiling away, under Japanese supervision. And nobody here serves Japan. It was no surprise. Years of disinterest from Tokyo led the tycoons, the four companies of Sony, Matsushita, Fujitsu, and Yasuda, as well as the outsiders, Hong Kong, drink deep and greedily. Through them, the Chinese were tied to their meager wages. The Cantonese Japanese chased feudal dreams. The Japanese were well wedded to handsome dividends. Suzuki snubbed out his cigarette, turning back to the mountain of charts littering his desk. The challenge of bringing Guangdong back into the Japanese fold loomed even higher. But to Suzuki, an architect of Japan's wartime economy, it was just one more puzzle to solve. Sunlight fades and the city bathes in neon and fluorescent lights. Oh man, we're gonna start unlocking more stuff on our GUIs. Oh boy. Okay. Oh no. Oh no. Starting a little gamery, it seems. Ooh. This is all very interesting, I gotta say. But we should get to this when we get to this. We got time. A new year, another meeting. Time has come to meet the Japanese government once again and deliver a report of the state of Guangdong's economy. Prime Minister Ino has set high expectations out of us, and that we have fulfilled to the best of our ability. Whether or not he and the rest of the government will approve is an entirely different matter, but no one knows the future, least of all us. Skimming over that a little bit. Yeah, that all seems fair. All seems fair from what I'm reading. Goring as a successor. Interesting. Oh, the Kashag of Tibet. They have a new name. It's interesting. Lock my Streamlabs out. The former Peninsula Hotel in Hong Kong, now the Taikoku Hotel in Hong Kong, a group of Japanese senior bureaucrats and executives sat around a table filled to the brim with the best possible food the hotel chefs could possibly offer. There was nothing that one could not find and feast on at the table. Fugu. Expensive sashimi. Even foreign delicacies from Germany and smuggled in American comfort foods. As Weasley's gourmanded and stuffed their stomachs to the brim twice and 3 times over, they discussed the latest gossip. Legislation in the council, the impact it might have on their businessmen, and so on and so forth. They also blabbed out the most recent news from Japan. Prime Minister Ino's constant surge for growth, the warnings uttered by Ikeda and Takagi, nothing was off limits. Slurs and insults as those that the demand had deemed other and less than, such as Okio or the Chinese, were liberally used. If someone was to ask why these people have the possibility of a conflict of interest, they would say, conflict of interest, never met her. She from Beijing? But discussion shifted to the topic of somebody who'd been missing from the conversation. Where's Sanada? How long has it been since he's last been here? Been a few weeks, I wager. An investor offered what info he had. I heard the poor wretch lost everything on a bad investment and then disappeared before they could collect. Most people exchanged grim looks, but a bureaucrat laughed loudly. Should have collected on the bastard sooner. If he disappeared into the mass of Chinese like you say he has, there's nothing we can do now. As we chuckled and went back to their gossip. That is very fair and nuanced, Kev. I can appreciate that. Okay. Whew. The regions of Guangdong. Okay. Between the Chinese mainland and South China Sea lies Guangdong, an artificial state with an artificial culture and identity. In the hot pot of Chinese and Japanese culture lie the 3 main ethnic groups. The Chinese, the Zhoujin, and the Japanese, who in each state have their own level of approval for our government. Each of these ethnic groups represents the Cantonese societal ladder, and their support, or lack thereof, can make or break the finances and stability of the state of Guangdong. Though it might not seem like in the midst of bustling cities of free pearls, Guangdong is a major refuge as well for the outcasts and criminals of Japanese and Chinese societies, the Chinese triads and the Japanese yakuza. Our own police force is not enough to stop these forces from overrunning our nation. It's turning it into an opium den. But the ones who help us police these groups are as ferocious and corrupt, if not more so. The Japanese Kenpaitai, who hold the amount of people hold the people obedient through violence and force. The amount of group controls each state, and potentially the majority of Guangdong's regions, will have major effects on the different demographic support of Guangdong. Chinese and Japanese support for our government, and how corrupt or not our society will be. There is a lot of stuff going on there. Oh god, we have charts. Oh god. Wow. This is fascinating. I have no idea how any of this is gonna work, but figure it out. Yeah, the Lincoln comparison is fair there. Chow Man Choi lived in a world of other people's routines. He woke, according to strangers' clocks, ate on schedule, declined by others' movements, and he made his way to work just when others were leaving theirs. As the owner of a Dai Pai Dong, a small outdoors restaurant stall, his work depended on timing. He knew when to open a stall at 2100 sharp, so that it would be ready and waiting for the workers emerging, hungry and tired as a shift change. His work had become an art. Thanks to government fees, most of the money he made went straight to the cost for his stall, and his business existed in a delicate state. It had not always been like that before. Before the Japanese had come, he'd been a chef. I can't speak English. At a larger restaurant, not some rickety stall, serving the elite of the Pearl River Delta. After the Japanese arrived, they expropriated the restaurant and evicted the Chinese chefs, preferring Japanese for positions while the natives were relegated to being waiters and busboys. It'd been a rough time for him, but the Dai Pai Dong had been a godsend. His reverie of memories was interrupted by the chatter of first arriving customers. He accumulated loyal regulars who came for his conversation just as much as his food, so he smiled broadly at their arrival. 3 dishes of beef chow fun, a bowl of Naguan porridge, and a bowl of wonton noodles. One of his regulars, a man named Chen, said. The workers had a mighty appetite after unlikely shifts, and Chow merely set about out making their orders. He had his place in the city, even after everything had happened, and worked with a small smile on his face. Order up. UPF style. The hand symbol, I think, is the Yakuza. I want to say. Yeah, the hand symbol is the Yakuza. I gotta check the comic screen real quick. I realized. I have a surplus going, which is actually pretty good. I'm gonna lower our army expenditures. We have a very nice credit rating. Well, that's interesting. I think it's going to depend on our surplus, how it all works. That is very interesting. In a chilly, uninspired boardroom, Prime Minister Ino gazed out of a window to watch over the skyline and the illuminating buzz of the city. He was accompanied by Suzuki, who had agreed to meet Ino and discuss matters of affairs between their two nations. The great man cleared his throat, beginning to speak, before turning his head to face Suzuki, who he found sat in a lovely chair not far off from his seat. Suzuki, you and I both know the use of the companies operating in the South. They'll bring you riches before you can blink, and as I'm sure you are aware, they'll gut you the moment you turn your back on them. It's a tough line to walk, keeping the companies in check. But I trust you're able to do it and let wealth flow down the Pearl River. Ino sat himself down, and leaned back in one of the chairs with a grin on his face, fattening off one of the pleasures that he had from being the dominant speaker in the room. Suzuki clenched his jaw, acknowledging he was in no position to question Ino, drawing bated breath in front of his Japanese patron. Before he could get a word in, Ino coughed more thoughts, testing the very fiber of Suzuki's attention. Say, you know the growth targets we calculate for Guangdong? It'll have to meet what we expect this year. We can't afford exceptions. And that problem with the Chinese also needs clearing up. If I'm honest, Suzuki, you have a lot of work to do. Best get started sooner rather than later. Well, it must be done. Every year, tens of thousands of shareholders on the Japanese mainland expect their returns on Guangdong to investments in Guangdong to make a return, and expect to see high growth. Should we meet these goals, business will continue as usual, but if they are missed, political consequences will be severe. For next year, our shareholders expect a real growth of 8% or GDP of 23 billion USD. Alexa, American Pearl River GUI in the Decisions tab. Okay. Oh, we got a lot of shit. Oh my god. Even if a chief executive sits atop the food chain in Guangdong, there are three things that conspire to throw a wrench in the plans. Two are that are outside of chief executive control, and one that fusses everything in Guangdong. Formless, but undeniably present. The Empire of Japan, the backer of Guangdong's security and its greatest investor, has expectations that must be met, lest the chief executive suffer their disapproval and open himself up to attack by jealous peers. And the ROC has never had a very high opinion of Guangdong. The state carved out of its southern province, it certainly knows how to make life difficult for the companies and chief executive, if it is so inclined. And beyond it all, corruption seeps into every crack and crevasse, locking up the gears of government with vice and apathy. Even if some would say that such is the fate of a nation that worships the yen beyond anything else, nobody enjoys having to deal with corruption, rotting away its souls, cheapening work, and crimping profits. Let's purge some corrupt officials. Start off with. Next, we have the Miracle on the Pearl River. State Guangdong was carved out of the ROC with one express purpose in mind: using Japanese engineering supremacy to create wealth benefiting both the co-prosperity sphere and investors back in Tokyo. The thousands of investors who each day analyze Guangdong's economic performances from the comfort of a Tokyo stock exchange, however, demand return on investments. Each year, Guangdong's economic performance, in form of pure GDP, will be evaluated to see if the economic growth has reached the goal set the year prior. The state derives much of its legitimacy from these evaluations. Therefore, they maintain great relevancy for the composition of the Legislative Council, Japanese approval, and the demographics of Guangdong. The eventual goal is for Guangdong to overtake Japan's favorite subject, headquartered in Hsing, where the grand objective is managing a larger economy, the Empire of Manchuria. However, while growth and raw economic output remains paramount, maintaining a balanced sheet is tantamount to upholding investor trust. Should our debt to GDP spiral upwards, our credit rating will take a hit, Japan would be growing more displeased, our political capital will be reduced, and trust in Guangdong's markets will be decreased, leading to an increase in inflation. Therefore, keeping our spending and debt in control is of great importance for maintaining the miracle on the Pearl River. God, we got a lot of shit we need to manage. Well, it looks like we're gonna add some more stuff. Sony, Yasuda, Matsushita, and Fujitsu. The continued cooperation of these four companies are integral to the stability and profit of Guangdong. Yet their interests all diverge from each other and they all continue to butt heads. This must be kept to an absolute minimum, as we cannot afford instability at this juncture. Thus, Chief Executive Suzuki will meet with all four companies to secure their support and keep everything stable. There we go. Chief Executive Suzuki tried not to let his shortness of breath show as he entered his office, taking pains to slow his stride and mask his chest's chests heavy heaving by straightening his tie. He made no such effort to hide his irritation at PM Eno, who now stood languidly at the desk as if expecting guests in Suzuki's own office. I'm sorry I've kept you waiting. I'm afraid my cabinet secretaries will need me back shortly. A cabinet meeting? My apologies. Eno dripped his head slightly, a formality without feeling. I was just thinking about our conversation the other day. I might be able to help you. You're aware of the Mullane problem, yes? Of course. Suzuki had read the reports of the ongoing peace preservation operations in Sionan for years by now. What about it? The IJ Garrison reports Tokyo not... The army needs new rifles, Suzuki. Standard issue is enough to flush out those guerrillas. I see. You realize that the companies here make electronics, not weapons. Why not ask the Manchurians? I'm asking you. I can get in the Army Ministry to request proposals. All you have to do is submit a design. We sign a contract, you get paid. I don't see what's the problem. Suzuki fixed his once junior in the Tojo cabinet with a wary eye. The army he'd served was rarely so careless if your contracts turned to first-time manufacturers. But Eno had always been a deal-maker, and Suzuki needed a win. I'll see what the companies can do. That is interesting. Oh no, my roommates are home. They're playing music. I might get copyright struck. Hoping not, but I have to wait and see. Anyway, on a cloudy, smoggy, and grim evening, Yokai Lee, one of the millions of housewives in the city of Koshu, wandered through the city's wet markets. Her purpose was twofold, looking for goods for the night's supper and trying to find things to prepare for the upcoming Lunar New Year. Another year had passed since she had followed her husband. He had headed south from his and her rural village somewhere in Shaoguan to find work. As frequently happened, she was bothered by feelings of regret. She'd wish they hadn't left. She'd seen the beggars on the streets without arms or legs, eaten alive and spit out by the brutal factories. And she thought though she might lack literacy, she wasn't blind. She could see the occasional body on the suicide net strung up above virtually every street. Excuse me. She'd hoped her husband wouldn't end up like that. But she knew quite well that the will of heaven was not something that one could influence by hopes or predictions. Not being willing to lay down and die, all she could do now was focus on the passing days, picking and choosing between wilted vegetables and preserved meats to preserve you until the morrow. At that moment, her ruminations were interrupted. She had found a good deal. A wide smile crossed her face as she handed over Vivi again and took the food into her bag. She and her husband would have something better than normal to eat this new year, and that made her so happy. After her husband's happiness was hers, and hers was his. True, she hadn't married him for love, but the two had learned to love each other, and that made the hell of iron that was Guangdong so much more bearable. Therefore, since the world has still much good, but much less good than ill. So we need 23 billion, we're 2 billion away. A little less than 2 billion away. Need manpower for that, it seems. I don't want to mess with this too much because I don't really know how it works. I'll probably have to look up some guides. I think I kind of know what I want to do, which path I'm going to do. I'm not going to do Sony. Just because someone else took Sony. I'm leaning towards one of the other paths right now, but I'll do some thinking on it because I'm going to end the stream soon anyway. But for now, I'm ending it here. So thanks always for watching, my friends. If you like to see it, like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you want to see more of this kind of feature, hit the sub button for uploads weekdays as well as occasionally Saturdays. Make comments, feedback, concern, leave in the comment section below. I read all the comments I get and appreciate any feedback you might have for me. A bunch of links down in the description box below if you want to check those out. And yeah, that's about it for now, friends. My name is Mr. Dog with 353. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.